Okay, and just a quick reminder as I'm setting this up, here we go, for our Grading for Equity Day 4 of our book study, turn your screens off. I can't see you. Just relax and just turn them on and your volume on when we go into breakout groups. So today's webinar, we're going to do a preview of chapters 5 and 6, and I know some of you have probably already read them, and we're going to spend some time talking about our next steps as a group. And I just always want to remind us to think about what's best for students. So structure today, we will have start with a breakout. I'll do some preview and another breakout, and then the kind of later half's all going to be about where we're going from here. So breakout discussion number 1 is actually the question I left you with at the last webinar, and it is, what impact does being judged for every mistake, being awarded points for their actions, and being faced with complex and variable grading have on students' motivation to learn? So we're going to hopefully have groups of about 4. Going to give you 5 minutes to discuss, so a little wiggle room there. And if Morgan, if you're ready to go for that, do it.
Just a minute, because there's several people entering right now.
Okay. So can they just be added so others can go in and start discussing?
Yeah, they can be. I just wanted the group to get in there so that when I make the groups, they come out right.
Okay.
All right, so now I'm going to do breakout groups. And you want 5 in the breakout groups or
4.
7?
I'd rather have 4. Yeah.
Oh.
So while she's doing that, remember, somebody take the lead so we can move through and not waste time. Somebody be a timer. I learned last time that some people don't like to be the facilitator or the timer. So whoever is willing to do that, jump in and take charge of that.
Okay, so you're going to have 5 minutes with a 60-second warning after that. So technically, you're going to have 6 minutes, and you don't have to leave the room when you get the warning. It'll just send you back. All right, okay. Here we go, here we go.
How's that working there? You get them?
Yep. Okay. Neil need to accept the invitations, but they've been assigned. Melanie's coming in.
We're going to throw you into a group, Melanie, and they're talking about the impact of points on students' motivation to learn.
Okay, I'm going to pause.
Okay.
And we're back.
All right. So I'm assuming that people talked about some of the same things that Feldman might have talked about. The kids might feel constantly judged, and that actually kind of shuts down their motivation. That some kids are confused and overloaded and overwhelmed, and they often can feel defined by that single grade, which can motivate them to meet the expectations or demotivate them. And I just want to point this out, that sometimes our traditional grading practices and grading makes kids feel like they are defined by a single grade. And what that does is it creates a fixed mindset. So kids come in and they have this previous experience or their current experience. The grade says, I am dumb, so I will avoid doing the things that remind me of this. And that's our kids that we have trouble getting them to engage with us. They become disengaged and they feel disempowered, like they can't do anything about it, so they just avoid it. And on the other end of that, there are the kids, the grade says I'm smart, I got an A, so I will do what I need to do to maintain that. But what happens is it kind of limits their learning because they only do what they need to do to maintain that grade, to meet the rubric, to get the A, and they're not really challenging themselves beyond what they can do. And these kids also, they become motivated sometimes to do the wrong thing, like cheating or copying. Like, I got to get this done, I didn't have time, let me see your notes, they copy your notes. Or the plagiarism thing because they got behind on their paper. So sometimes it does that. So in chapter 5, he talks about types of motivation. And I found this really interesting because I've always personally sort of struggled with the word mastery, because I feel like with reading and writing, we don't master it in high school. Like, I don't even feel like I've mastered it now. Like, we're always working on it, always improving. But I liked his definition of a mastery goal, where he says that success is based on students' own evaluation, which is a Hattie thing, or whether she reaches some external standard. Did you meet the standard? So have I learned or have I improved? And in contrast to that are performance goals, where success is based on demonstrating competence in others' eyes. So do others think I did well, like my peers? Did my teacher like what I wrote? So those performance goals, there's judgment there. He says that research has found that students define these goals in large part based on their learning environment. We as teachers influence whether students see academic success as a mastery or performance goal, and we therefore influence how they behave in response to the tasks we give them, which in turn affects their likelihood of success. We influence how students behave in response to the tasks we give them. We influence how they respond to the way that we grade them. So as he moves into chapter 6, it's about moving forward into these 3 core ideas that he has about minimizing negative impact on learning. He asked the question, how can we minimize traditional grading's negative impact on learning, particularly for vulnerable student populations? And he asked that we think about expanding our educational equity. He says, how can we use grading to expand rather than limit educational equity and achievement in our schools? And he asked us to reimagine how we can encourage with our grades. How can we instead reimagine grading to encourage rather than undermine effective teaching and learning? And so chapter 6 is really just a kind of a summary of the rest of the book, which I know most people are so excited to get to, of his 3 pillars for equitable grading practices. The first pillar is accurate grading practices that validly reflect students' academic progress. The second is bias resistant, grading practices that prevent biased subjectivity from infecting the overall grades. And the final one is motivational, academic success, motivating academic success, motivating perseverance, motivating that they gain critical lifelong skills. So those are the 3 pillars. The accurate pillar, just getting a little more specific with it, this is about that mathematically sound grade, that the calculations actually show what they are learning and their growth, that they correctly describe the student's level of academic performance. And these are the practices that make it easy for students to understand their growth and their learning. In this section, he covers things like avoiding zeros, a concept he calls minimum grading, the 0 to 4 scale versus the traditional letter grade scale, weighting more recent performance versus earlier, and grades based on an individual's achievement, not the group's. For the bias resistant pillar, he talks about that grades should be based on valid evidence of a student's content knowledge, not based on evidence that is likely to be corrupted by teachers' implicit bias or reflect a student's environment. So these are the practices that value knowledge, not environment or behavior. And in this pillar, in this section, he presents practices that are based on required content, not extra credit, that are based on student work, not the timing of the work. They have alternative non-grade consequences for cheating that exclude participation and effort, that are based entirely on summative assessments, not formative like homework. And the motivational pillar, the third one, these are the grading practices that motivate kids to achieve academic success. These are the ones that support a growth mindset and that give opportunities for redemption. These are the practices that support hope and a growth mindset. These are the practices that lift the veil where targets for academic success are clear and explicit, and practices that build soft skills without including them in the grade. And in this section, these are the practices. He talks about minimum grading and the 0 to 4 scale again. He talks about renaming grades, retakes and redos, creating a community of feedback, rubrics, this thing he calls student trackers, emphasizing self-regulation as a soft skill and being based on standard scales, not points. So as we go into this next section, whether you have read about each of these or not, I want you to just kind of discuss in this breakout group, which pillar do you think kind of confirms your teaching more, the accurate grading, the bias resistant, the motivational, and why? Thinking about the confirmation bias of your interest here, which pillar might challenge your own web of belief that might be harder for you to think about what you do versus what he might ask you to do? and maybe which pillar seems most pressing for you to explore due to your teaching context for the fall, and why. So we all have different students and school, so which one would really be most accurate for, or the best one for you. So when you think about this, you don't have to answer all of these questions. You have 2 minutes in your group. It's gonna be a longer breakout discussion, about 2 minutes each with a little wiggle room. Answer 1, 2, or 3 of these questions, just kind of exploring which are the practices that are most interesting to you, or might challenge you, or you really need to explore because of your teaching context. Okay, Morgan, you're on. Are you doing the groups, Morgan? Oh, there we go.
Okay, we're back. Go right ahead.
Okay. So the reason we wanted you to think about those things is because of where we're going. So this week, and not necessarily today, but today or tomorrow, we're going to ask that you pick a pillar to do a deep dive with. And what that means is you can read the other sections, but that with a group or on your own, you spend a little bit more time and you do some reflecting on the practices that are being recommended by Feldman. So what will happen is that Morgan is going to send out a Google form, which is really the feedback form that you've been filling out, but she's added some things to it for you to sign up where your interest is. So think a little bit more about it, maybe open up the book later today and take a little bit closer look at the pillars and decide which one you really want to jump into. So then in July, we're going to have our pillar teams do a deep dive, and they'll explore that selected pillar. And again, you can always look at the other ones too, but this is for that group work. And with that group work, we're going to ask that individuals by the end come up with a commitment of at least one practice from that section to try out as we go in the fall. And secondly, for that group to come up with which grading practices they would recommend to the state to be sharing with others as well. So there'll be two things to do there. And then finally in August, we'll all come back together on Tuesday, August 4th, and Morgan will send out a meeting invite, but from 9 to 11, it may not take all the way till 11, but we'll have teams come and report out about their pillar deep dive and share their best practice recommendations and individual commitments. So to do that, one last thing, this is a quick important note. Some people don't like working in groups, and that's okay. So if you prefer to do it on your own, in July, you on the feedback form, you can say that you're gonna do it on your own, you don't wanna be in a group. You can do your reading and reflecting and make a grading practice commitment for the fall to try out. And then in August, come to the culminating event and listen to the other group report outs. And again, this is a little bit more clarity on the outcomes from the group work in July, which the groups will decide how often they do or don't want to meet. But some statewide recommendations, 2 parts. 1, the recommended practices from that pillar that you think would be best for the state to focus on. And 2, the barriers and openings to succeed with these practices in our main school systems. And then on the individual commitment, kind of similar, which practice are you particularly choosing? Why'd you choose it? Why do you think it'll work for you at your school system? And what might get in your way, the barriers, and what might help you succeed, the openings, both for you personally and also at your school, the systemic. We do need some people on that feedback form to volunteer to be our team leaders. We will be asking our team leaders to attend an orientation meeting on Thursday at 1, and that's where we're going to talk about how they can facilitate through July. We'll ask them to connect with their team. So once they get their team list, they'll set up the first meeting and email all of you by the end of this week, so you know who's your leader and which group you're in. And then we'll ask that leader to facilitate the deep dive, and their role really is to help everyone participate and share in this space as they think about the practices. So again, just quick reminder. So next step, today and tomorrow, fill out the Google form, whichever day works for you, about what you want to do for July. In July, you'll do that deep dive individually or in the groups. And then in August on the 4th from 9 to 11, we will all come back and do the report out. Morgan, you have something you want to share about this? Are you there, Morgan?
Yep, sorry, I was shuffling things around to make sure I was coming up to the right screen here. Okay, so I think what I need for you to do is to stop sharing.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, and then I'm going to share my screen. I want to talk about this this form. I just want to make sure you understand. So first of all, the opportunity to talk with a commissioner is really important. You know,
You didn't tell them about that yet. They don't all know about that.
All right, we're going to wait about that. All right.
You can set your form up. So tell them about the form first, then that.
We'll come back. Okay, let's talk about the form. So what we're doing with the form is the first part will look very familiar. Like I have to collect a certain amount of data in order to provide, to build my report at the end. So that's going to be really familiar to you, where it is, and you know, the rating of the event. But then we have these questions. Are you interested in working with a group to continue studying the text? And this should be a single, you know, you've got to choose one of these. Yes, no, on the fence, want more information, you can put maybe, or you're going to commit to studying on your own. We'll just leave you alone. I won't follow up with you. We want you to choose a pillar. Think about which pillar you're most interested in studying with a team. You may be interested in studying all three pillars. I know I keep saying tillers, I do that. But you may be interested in all three, but is there one that you really want to make sure that you're studying with other people to help your thinking about that? And so you would choose that one, which would help us start sorting and creating groups. Then we also want to think about which grade level, because I think there could be very different approaches, whether you're 6, 8, 9, 12, or we've got a section in there for other grade levels, because I realize some of you have like K-12 responsibilities or broader, maybe you've got a whole 6-12. So we'll see how many books come out with this other kind of category. And then as we're forming the groups, we also want to get a chance, want to think about how often you would be willing to meet with your small group. Just one time to check in, or weekly, because that may help us form groups differently as well. A big question is, if you are willing to work in a group, are you willing to be a team leader? Are you willing to be someone who would take that responsibility for you know, setting up your meetings, for maintaining that communication with your small group? And if you are willing to be a team leader, can you join us at 1 o'clock this Thursday for an orientation? And that's where Patty and I will really lay it out for you, so that we're not asking you to invent the way that you study the text, that we're going to help give you the supports and structures you need to do that effectively. So this feedback form is a little bit longer than the ones you've done. But again, when you get to the end, you'll get your contact hour for today. Okay, I'm going to stop that share. Are there any questions?
No, I just think that's pretty cool. But so is Commissioner Macon going to like listen? She's going to take our feedback and do something with it?
Go ahead, Morgan. Now tell them about Pender Macon and the meeting.
Oh, I'll tell you. So what I wanted to do from the start was to get Commissioner Macon to hear the questions. You've had really great questions and great ideas. And Patty shared with you an idea where we're going. I think that it would be helpful for the commissioner to hear your thinking about grading and equity, because she's definitely very committed to equity and to innovative thinking. So she wants to hear your ideas. But I think it's an opportunity for us to share with her supports and barriers. You know, what kinds of supports, knowing that we're a local control state, so the state has no control over local grading whatsoever. So therefore, what kinds of supports could Maine DOE provide to help with this idea of improving grading equity? And what are some of the barriers that you perceive as you look at transforming your own practices.
So what Morgan will do before that meeting, just really quickly, is she'll share the report outs from all the groups to Pendermaken before we meet with her. And then she has a date. She sent it out this morning about a meeting with Pendermaken that invites all of you to attend, but she will have reviewed our recommendations prior to that. Sorry, Morgan.
There was a little bit of confusion because I sent out the August 4th meeting, which is when that's a working meeting for us to prepare what we want to take to the commissioner as supports needed and barriers, which really, like, how can you help us to take down these barriers? And then I sent you the invitation for the August 12th meeting, and that's the one with the commissioner, just to have that open discussion with her. I don't know if you've had a chance to talk with Commissioner Macon, but she loves to hear from teachers doing the work. She loves to have those conversations with people who are, doing innovative things. And I'm sure that she will invite other people from her team. Like, she has a whole office of innovation, and she's got another team working hard on equity. So she may want to invite them in to hear the conversations. So we can share, by us meeting a week before that gives us a little bit of time to think about what we want the commissioner to know and her team, and just to prepare for how we'll have that.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. I was just all of a sudden.
I saw you distracted reading the chat. So anybody else have a question kind of about that overall plan before I end up addressing the idea of how do we change others at our schools, in our departments at our schools? Questions about our plan moving forward? Just put your mute off and say it.
Well, I just have a simple question. I'm not I don't need to be a leader of a breakout group, but I cannot do that Thursday Zoom. So I'm going to put no to the group leader then, but then if I'm just saying, if you don't get enough people, I'd be willing to do it, but I just can't make that meeting.
I think the better choice would be to say, yes, I'm willing to be a group leader. No, I can't.
No, I can't. Yeah.
Right, and then I'll know.
Anyone else? Questions?
I'm in the same situation as her. I wouldn't be able to meet on Thursday, but I'd be willing to be a leader.
So if we get enough of those, maybe we'll try to schedule another orientation as well. If we're short, yeah, I think we could do that.
Yeah, or you could record it. I don't know, whatever you guys want to do.
Yes,
if you record it, I could watch it.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns about our plan for July and into August?
I'm really curious to know whether folks are right now feeling drawn to a pillar. Do you want to ask Patty any questions before you're sort of forced to make that choice?
Yes. May I comment?
Yep.
Of course.
Yeah, for me, the motivational pillar seems most important, but that may not be the one that's most applicable to my school.
I would recommend, it depends on where you are with trying to make grading change with your school. If you're just starting, I would go with the one that is most important for you. If you're already working with your department or others at your school, then think bigger about the school system and what your school needs. But if you're really just starting out, I recommend going where you're being called to go for you and your students.
Got it. Okay.
Of course, you can look at all of it. You have the book.
Right.
Which is awesome.
Well,
What's the deep dive?
I'm happy that our school has shifted from 0 to 100 to 1 to 4, but there's even issues within 1 to 4.
Sure.
There's even issues around that, and so and we kind of struggle with that, and I feel like that's all been kind of put on hold because of the school closure.
Right.
So
Provides a golden opportunity, right? Because I'm a huge fan of the single point rubric. I feel like for all our formative work, it should be a single point rubric. That's me. That's what showed up when people were forced to go to pass fail. right? Like pass fail. Oh, we're talking about a single point rubric. Either you do meet it or you don't. Okay, here's what you have to do to meet it, or here's how you did meet it, right?
Yes.
Single point rubric. So that is great for formative assessment, really forcing you in there.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I don't know that's necessarily in the book, but these are the conversations that we can have, and this is where certainly within small groups we can take the deeper dive. My vision, I guess, is that once the groups are formed, we've got 80 people who signed up to be a part of this book study. We'll see how many want to break into smaller groups for the month of July, and Patty and I will. We'll figure out how we can be available to jump in if we're invited, you know, and check on and see what you like and how many conversations you'd like us to be a part of. Patty, don't you like how I just volunteered you for that? I mean, I think we didn't get to that level of detail, but
I would be happy to if it works within my summer plans.
this is how I work. Just so you know, this is how I work.
I feel that already. I've already felt that. But anyone else? Thoughts, comments, concerns? Yes.
Could I just ask a quick question? If I'm here with someone, if I'm here with my team teacher, and we pick the same pillar and we want to work together, how can we let you know that?
Email Morgan.
Okay.
Because Morgan is going to set up the groups and she's going to use the form, but we don't have that on the form yet, and I don't know if Morgan can change that, but I would just email. Would that work for you, Morgan? Somebody just emailed you if they really want to work with a team teacher? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any others?
I have a question. If there's a recommendation over, I guess I'm torn between the accuracy or the motivation. And when it comes down, they fall in different categories. Like the motivation might be what options are available for students to show their learning or apply their learning. And the accuracy comes down to how they meet the standard or what the rubric is. And so I'm torn between which is a better fit. Like I'm working to encourage a group of teachers. So is it better to try to land on motivation or accuracy? I know they're all three pillars, but.
I'm trying to remember, and I had it somewhere. What page? There's a nice overview of the practices.
Mm-hmm.
It's page 70 something. I would look there again before you make your decision.
Okay.
I think it's in chapter 6, but and then you can really see the practices that are, remind yourself of the practices that are being explained there. That's what I would do to really decide and really think about my team that I'm working with and where I think they might need to be looking.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Thoughts, questions, comments? Working on my wait time.
Can I just ask you, are there any other elementary people? Because I could do 6th grade, but my school is K6. But I didn't know if there were any other elementary people. So when I sign up, I could go with 6. Or
Yeah, I'm a K6, K8
okay.
school.
Okay. Oh, that's good.
So if you want to go younger, then do the other category, I think.
Okay.
We didn't put it as because this was really targeted 5, 6 and up. But yeah, maybe do the other and then also send. I don't know, Morgan. You want more emails?
I think if I did it right, you click other and then you'll put in there what it is. So that's another sorting option.
Okay.
I did ask for you to do this feedback form by 5 o'clock tomorrow night, because Patty and I were going to talk on Thursday. Like I wanted to have the time to sort through and make the groups and see what so that we can tell team leaders when we do the orientation on Thursday. So yeah, I'll do my best to accommodate everybody's needs.
Thank you.
Anyone else? last call. Waiting. Because I know it takes a second to unmute yourself. Okay, so once I hear someone pop in, I'm gonna share my screen again to hit this last topic that I saw it in the feedback form. A lot of people asked about how do we change ourselves and others, thinking about like people in our departments probably, or people we teach with, or our whole school systems. And that is a tough question, and I've struggled with that my whole career, and it's not easy. So I was going to show you this video, but I'm going to come back to it if there's time, because it's about 7.5 minutes. It's linked in this the PDF that Morgan will post, or she could also email it to all of you. It's really good video about why it's hard for people to change. But we'll see if we have time for that, because I do want to talk about this part. What's most important, and this is what I've learned, is that you've got to start with yourself. And I think many of us know that. You start with you do your own research, you do your own learning, and so everyone in this group is already doing that. You're starting with you, and maybe you've already been thinking about it before this group came along, or maybe this is the first time you've really started to dig deeper into our grading practices. But you have to start with yourself and build your own knowledge and confidence. And you also have to grapple with a little bit of how some of these practices might tug at your web of belief. And I know for me, I got this book, I think last fall, and so I started to try out some of the practices. And there was a point, he recommends the no zeros, that putting in something like, we have a 100-point scale, so I would put in a 50% and say need to submit. And so I did that, and it was amazing that a kid who never did anything finally felt he had a chance, and he turned something in. It was like, what? But later in the semester, it was time to come to the final grade, and I had some kids who had done a summative assessment. I was like, they haven't done it. How can I pass that? How can I give them a 50 with all the other things that's going to add up to a pass? And so I questioned that. It was like tugging at my beliefs, and I had to really think about it and process it. So I actually changed what I was doing, and then I went, you kind of ebb and flow, and you've got to try these things out. So start with yourself, be patient with yourself, learn about these things, and figure out what really works. And then when you know something that really works and you can share that with others with evidence from your own students, that's when you can go beyond you. I highly recommend getting this book too, for all of us that are language arts teachers. Pointless talks about shifting more to grading comments versus points. Somebody in the group, Michelle, recommended this book, Grading Smarter, Not Harder. I could practice my main accent, grading smarter, not harder. But they shared a few quotes with Morgan and I want to throw this in here as another possible learning tool for you. But this is the thing that really started to change at my school, is that I got this book and started to read it, and I was excited about things in it. And so I started to share ideas with others, and I shared it with my principal, and he loved it, and he bought the book for our whole leadership team, and we started to study with it. And I think he had the intent of next year getting this for our whole staff. That plan may have changed because of everything else. But then at the end of this semester, with our summer PD we just did, he asked me to step out and up and do a presentation to our whole staff because I've been doing this work. So it starts small, but it started as small as I read the book, I made some of my own changes and learning, and I shared it with others. And I will continue to share it with others because I do think it really helps us think about these practices we've been doing all this time. So I think so sharing a book, not just ourselves, our own opinions, is what could help break down someone else's web of belief and get them to consider other possibilities. So do that when you're ready. I think that's what's so important. Like, build your confidence, share with people that you know are interested in this, and then when you're ready, share with those that you know are resistant. They are the last ones that you're going to want to deal with. If you have a supportive administrator, get them that book, because they can work on the bigger picture with other staff members. But know that what you're doing is right for your kids. I think that's what's most important, that what you're doing is what you believe is to be best for kids. And I do want to also bring up this This is one of my favorite quotes. I'm sure many of you have seen it, but never doubt the small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. It's what's happening right now. She says, indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. We have to start somewhere. And we started with this group. We started with the 70 people that signed up for this group. I've now presented this also to my staff, which is another 70 people. That's 140 people in the state of Maine. And I presented to another group. That's another 50. So the numbers keep growing as you start to share. And that's how change happens. So that is my final word. I don't think, I'm gonna check the time. Yeah, I could show the video unless people have questions. So I do want to post. Does anybody have a question? And if not, then I'll show the video because I think it's really powerful. It's even a tool you might use with your students. Anyone? Thoughts, questions, epiphanies? Now's your chance. Because then I'm going to steal the last 7 minutes. Anybody? Anybody? Okay, I'm going back. You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. That's the video. It's actually also a comic strip.
Stop. Wait.
Hold on.
You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. I'm going to tell you some things. You're not going to believe these things I tell you. And that's okay. You have good reason not to. But I need you to keep listening regardless of what you believe. I don't care if you're liberal, conservative, or somewhere in between. I don't care if you're a cat person, a dog person, or a tarantula person. Morning person or night owl, iPhone, Android, Coke, or Pepsi, I don't care. All I care about is that you read this to the end. Sound good? Then let's begin. You may have heard that George Washington had wooden teeth. He lost most of his teeth in his 20s and had a set of dentures made out of wood. It's a disturbing visual. The founding father, commander-in-chief, and first president of the United States click-clacking his way through a ham sandwich. Except it isn't true. In 2005, at the National Museum of Dentistry in Baltimore, laser scans were performed on Washington's 200-year-old dentures and found them to be made of gold, lead, hippopotamus ivory, horse, and donkey teeth. His mouth was a petting zoo of nightmares. Upon learning this information, I want to ask you something. How did it feel to learn this new fact about George Washington's teeth? I stated a thing, I provided evidence of that thing, and presumably you now believe the thing I stated. Presumably, your belief in the composition of George Washington's teeth has changed with little or no friction. Presumably, the next time you're at a party and George Washington's teeth come up in conversation, you're going to proudly impart this newfound knowledge to your fellow partygoers. Yes? Terrific, let's continue. What if I told you George Washington had another set of false teeth? What if I told you the other set wasn't made from wood, ivory, or any of the aforementioned materials? What if I told you it was made from the teeth of slaves? Now, let's try this again. How did it feel to learn this fact about George Washington? Any more of that friction I mentioned earlier? Before we go any further, allow me to reiterate. I am not here to convince you that George Washington was a bad person. I could go through all my cited sources and cherry-pick arguments that would either deify or demonize George Washington. I could paint a portrait of a monster, or I could exonerate a patriot. But as I said before, I don't care. It's not the point. The point is to give you an emotional barometer of how you feel when presented with new ideas. Because you may have noticed that the first fact about George Washington's teeth was rather easy to accept. I would even wager that when I told you the first fact, you accepted it without question. But when I told you the second fact, you immediately checked my sources and are now furiously composing an informed yet incendiary retort which you will boldly deliver to me in the form of a sour, blustering Facebook comment. And that's okay. That's all part of it. Let's try a few more. Napoleon Bonaparte was not short. He was 5'7", which is taller than the average Frenchman of the time. Thomas Crapper did not invent the flush toilet, nor did the word crap come about because of his name. Houseflies live for about a month, not 24 hours. Humans don't explode in a vacuum, nor do we boil. We just pass out from lack of oxygen and then we die. Again, as you read these facts, take stock of how you feel. I'm guessing you softened to the last few fairly easily. Let's try a few more and then we're done. There is zero evidence that Jesus Christ was born on December 25th. The Pledge of Allegiance was written by a socialist. 6 of the 7 justices who voted in favor of Roe v. Wade were Republican appointed. How'd those last 3 feel? Depending on your beliefs, I'm guessing it may have put some of you about here. At the very least, you can concede that it felt different to hear those statements compared to the ones about Napoleon or houseflies. Yes? But why? Why do we easily soften to some ideas but not to others? Why do we gnash our teeth when presented with evidence counter to our beliefs? Why do we not only ignore this evidence but dig our heels in deeper and believe more strongly in the opposing argument? Why would providing more evidence make someone less likely to believe in an idea? It seems backwards and bat-bum crazy bonkers to me. It turns out bat-bum crazy bonkers is a name in the world of neuroscience. It's called the backfire effect, and it's a well-documented psychological behavior. A few years ago at the University of Southern California's Brain and Creativity Institute, a study was conducted where participants were placed into an MRI machine. Once inside, they're presented with counter-arguments to strongly held political beliefs. A few examples. Laws restricting gun ownership should be made more restrictive. Gay marriage should not be legalized. As participants were read these counter-arguments, various parts of their brains were scanned for activity. What the study revealed was that the part of the brain that responds to a physical threat also responds to an intellectual one. This area of the brain is known as the amygdala, and is the emotional core of your mind. Unfortunately, it makes us biologically wired to react to threatening information the same way we'd react to being attacked by a predator. From an evolutionary standpoint, it makes sense. If you were a caveman and another caveman threw a boulder at your head, you wouldn't react biologically debating the pros and cons of getting brained. Core beliefs are the beliefs which people cherish the most deeply. They usually develop from childhood and are compounded by life experiences. Core beliefs are inflexible, rigid, and incredibly sensitive to being challenged. When I told you that George Washington's dentures were made from animal bones, it probably didn't ruffle many feathers. But when I suggested they were made from slave teeth, I'm guessing it caused strife with some of you. There are obvious cultural reasons for this. Slavery is a sensitive, hot-button issue. But there are biological reasons as well. The amygdala of your brain is screaming, battle stations! Some of you may have held a worldview that George Washington was a patriot and a hero. By presenting negative information about him, it challenged that worldview. Your brain loves consistency. It builds a worldview like we build a house. It has a foundation and a frame and windows and doors, and it knows exactly how everything fits together. If a new piece is introduced and it doesn't fit, the whole house falls apart. Your brain protects you by rejecting that piece. It then builds a fence and a moat and refuses to let in any visitors. This is why we have the backfire effect. It's a biological way of protecting a worldview. Just remember that your worldview isn't a perfect house that was built to last forever. It's a cheap condo, and over time, most of it will fall apart. So, what do we do about this? Some of you have probably been nodding along in agreement, waiting for me to deliver a series of clever, combative ways to offset the backfire effect. The disappointing truth is that I don't have much advice for you. I don't have a way to change the behavior of 7.5 billion people carrying their beliefs around like precious gems wrapped in hand grenades. Sure, there are ways of changing people's minds that are more effective than others, but ultimately, they all fall short. This is compounded by the internet, where anything can be cited as a source, and every disagreement degrades into a room full of orangutans throwing feces at one another. The best I can do is make you aware of it, so you can identify the backfire effect in your own brain, which isn't easy. Mind can't separate the emotional cortex from the logical one, and one could argue that this emotional underbelly is what makes us human. But I would argue that it's also what makes us animals. I sometimes pretend the amygdala of my brain is my pinky toe. When a core belief is challenged, I imagine it yelling and saying things at me. I let it yell. I let it have its moment. I let the emotional cortex fight its little fight, and then I listen, and then I change. Because this universe of ours is so achingly beautiful and blended together. We're all going the same direction. I'm not here to take control of the wheel or tell you what to believe. I'm just here to tell you that it's okay to stop, to listen, to change.
So it's 10:01, that went a little bit over, but the main thing here is that as you go into these practices, some of them will challenge your core beliefs, and that's going to happen because that's what the brain does. So slow down and really think about and use those groups to process those practices.
Hi, I'm Isaiah.
I didn't turn that volume
Today,
off.
I'm going to teach you how to play bears versus
Hold on.
babies.
Time out. I don't want to learn about
The goal
bears
of
and
the game
babies.
is to build adorable, magnificent.
Okay, sorry. YouTube. But do think about that backfire effect. You will be challenged at times with some of these practices, and use other people at your own school or in these groups to help you process them and consider what he's asking us to do, and go with the ones that actually work best for you. You can't make all the changes he recommends all at once. You just got to start somewhere, and that's what I hope for each of you, that you start somewhere and do what's best for your students.
I think that's one of the reasons to dig deeper into one pillar rather than, trying to embrace all three pillars at once.
So with that, if you have another meeting, hopefully most of us don't have any more meetings and maybe you can go do something else. Feel free to exit out if you do still have a question you want to ask. I'm not sure what Morgan's time looks like since she's hosting the meeting, but we can address questions or concerns, or you can say goodbye and go enjoy today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So I think I'll pause the recording.